Okay, so picture this. A country as massive as China, with a history that goes back thousands of years, just shatters. It breaks apart into dozens of little kingdoms, and each one is run by a general with his own private army. It sounds like something out of a movie, but it was the reality of China's Warlord Era, a period of pure chaos that would totally change the nation forever.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at how the Republic completely fell apart. Then we'll actually meet some of these warlords. After that, we're digging into the economics of all this chaos and the incredible toll it took on society. And stick around because finally, we'll see how all this turmoil somehow, accidentally, sparked a revolution.
And just to set the stage, let's start with this really powerful quote from the historian Emmanuel Hugh. He calls it the darkest in Republican history. Now, that's a heavy statement, right? And by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why he said that. So, how on earth does a massive ancient empire just fall apart? I mean, really. To get the Warlords era, we first have to look at the giant power vacuum that let it all happen in the first place. First things first, let's get our terms straight. A warlord wasn't just any old general. We're talking about commanders of personal armies. These guys were basically independent rulers of their own chunk of territory. Think of them as military governors who answered to absolutely no one but themselves. This whole period of intense fragmentation really kicks off around 1916. It follows the death of Yuan Shikai, who was pretty much the only guy holding the military together. For the next decade or so, these warlord factions were in a state of almost constant war, until a campaign in 1928 tried to reunify China and bring the era to a close, at least on paper. The historian John Fairbank put it perfectly. He called this the extremity of China's territorial disintegration. Just think about what that means. Yeah, there was still an official government in Beijing, but it was powerless, a total fiction. The real authority was now in the hands of these generals scattered all over the country. All right, let's move on and actually meet some of these guys. It's really easy to just paint them all with one brush, as villains. But the truth is, they were a surprisingly diverse and pretty complex group of people. And this slide really shows the two extremes of the warlord era. On one hand, you had guys like Zhang Zongchang, the dog-meat general. He was infamous for his brutality and corruption, basically a gangster with an army. But then you had someone like Yan Xishan, the model governor, who was genuinely trying to build industry and govern responsibly in his territory. This is so important because it shows that for an average person, your life could be completely different depending on which warlord's land you happen to live on. And the cast of characters here is just incredible. You had Feng Yusheng, the Christian general, who famously baptized his troops with a fire hose. No, seriously. Then there was Wu Pifu, the philosopher general, trying to rule based on ancient ideals. And of course, Zhang Zulin, the powerful marshal of Manchuria, who ran his territory like a state, but was heavily backed by Japan. Each of them was, for all intents and purposes, the king of their own little domain. Okay, so obviously, maintaining all these personal armies and fighting constant wars takes a colossal amount of money. So where did it come from? Well, the answer is simple and it's brutal. They paid for it by bleeding the country and its people completely dry. So just how bad was it? Well, in just one province, Guangdong, historians have counted over 30. That's 30 different types of taxes being forced on the people. I mean, imagine getting taxed on your land, your house, the salt you use, even the door you walk through. Literally everything was a source of cash to fuel the warlords' armies. But the damage went so much deeper than just taxes. Armies would just march through a village and take everything: food, livestock, you name it. This constant destruction of agriculture led directly to massive famines. And to make quick cash, some warlords forced farmers to stop growing food and start growing opium instead, creating a huge public health crisis. All the while, essential things like roads and dams were just ignored, crumbling into disrepair, which strangled the economy and left people totally vulnerable to floods. It was a vicious downward spiral that made life an absolute nightmare. You see, this economic and military free-for-all didn't just hurt people's wallets, it tore at the very fabric of Chinese society. It completely changed the fundamental relationship between the rulers and the people they ruled. For centuries, Chinese society was held together, at least in theory, by Confucian values. This stressed the obligation of the powerful to take care of the common people. Well, the warlords just shattered that idea.
They replaced that ancient social contract with a much, much simpler one. Might makes right. The only principle that mattered anymore was force.
For the peasants, this was a brutal, everyday reality. Your village could be looted, you could be forced to join an army against your will, and starvation was always, always a threat. But this created a really dark paradox. Think about it. If you were a young man with no future, facing starvation at home, what choice did you have? Ironically, the very army that might destroy your village was also maybe your only ticket out. Joining a warlord's army was a terrifying gamble, but it offered food, some pay, and maybe the slimmest chance of survival in a world that offered nothing else. But here's where the story takes this fascinating turn. Out of all this extreme division, this suffering, this national humiliation, an unexpected and powerful reaction started to grow. A movement for the exact opposite of chaos, unity. Which brings us to this critical historical question. How could this absolute chaos, this complete disintegration of a nation, actually become the very thing that would eventually forge a stronger, more unified China? It seems impossible, right? So, how did chaos lead to unity? It was like a three-step chain reaction. First, the endless suffering made people absolutely desperate for order. I mean, anything was better than this. Second, that desperation ignited this powerful new sense of nationalism. People started to feel that China itself was in danger and had to be saved. And third, this created a huge opening for new political movements that promised to do just that, to finally end the chaos and build a strong, unified China. So ultimately, the instability of the warlord era became the fertile ground for the two political groups that would go on to fight for China's soul. The nationalists, also known as the Kuomintang, or GMD, and the brand new Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Both of these movements gained massive support by offering the one thing the warlords couldn't, a vision for a unified, modern, and powerful China. The chaos had created a hunger for its exact opposite. And that leaves us with one final, provocative question to think about. This era was, without a doubt, a dark chapter of immense suffering. But, given the powerful forces for unity that it unintentionally unleashed, was this period of chaos a necessary, terrible crucible that China had to pass through to become the modern, unified nation it is today? It's something to think about.